Welcome back to The Critique. Today we are looking at a gritty, high-stakes thriller about a man who orchestrates a violent heist to steal a corporate ledger and clear his brother's name, ultimately sacrificing his own freedom in the process. But we need to jump right in because relying on a highly personalized, dropped physical item to trigger the police investigation completely undermines the established tactical intelligence of our protagonist.
Yeah, it really, really does. I mean, it does a massive disservice to the foundation the author just spent, like, 3 entire chapters building up.
Right, exactly.
Because the text goes way out of its way to establish this crew as incredibly meticulous. They are process-driven planners.
We see that right away in the opening sequence at Kwan's 24-Hour Express, right?
Exactly. I mean, they don't just kick the door down blindly like a bunch of amateurs.
No, they've got the whole thing mapped out.
Right, they calculate the precise emergency response times for the local precinct. They have their tech expert, Jin, use these digital bypass tools to put the alleyway security cameras on like a 15-minute delayed loop.
Which is such a great detail.
It is. They know they have exactly a 12-minute window before the automated system flags the anomaly. So as a reader, you get deeply invested in this high-level competence.
Yeah, and what I really love about that part is how it contrasts the digital stealth with just, overwhelming physical chaos.
Yeah, the breach.
Right. They buy themselves that specific 10-minute window, and then the muscle of the group uses a hydraulic breaching tool to literally blow the reinforced steel door right off its hinges.
It's a fascinating trade-off.
It really is. They are willing to trade digital immediacy for physical shock and awe, which shows a really high level of tactical awareness.
Which is exactly why the catalyst for their capture feels so jarring.
Yeah, it's a bit of a letdown.
So after they successfully execute this incredibly violent, high-stakes robbery, leaving bodies behind, securing the master ledger, they flee to their getaway car.
Right.
And the adrenaline starts to fade, and the protagonist reaches into his pocket for a vape pen to steady his nerves, and a custom silver Zippo lighter just slips out onto the floorboards.
And it's not even just like a generic lighter you grab at a gas station.
No, it's deeply engraved with his exact initials, M.A.V.
Right.
Yeah, having this brilliant street strategist randomly drop a custom piece of metal with his literal government initials on it at the scene of a heist feels incredibly contrived.
It does feel a little convenient.
It reads like a cliché, An overly convenient plot device just to get the detectives on his trail. And honestly, it clashes awkwardly with the brilliant organic irony that happens later in that exact same scene.
Oh, you mean the weather?
Yes, the heavy Philadelphia rain. It prevents the crew from successfully torching that getaway car to destroy the evidence.
Right.
The rain feels like an organic stroke of bad luck. But the lighter just feels manufactured.
I want to push back on that a little bit, though, because as I understand it from the notes, the argument here is that fine motor skills completely degrade after a massive adrenaline dump.
Sure, the physiology of it.
Right? It's a reality of combat or high-stress situations. You get the shakes, you lose your grip. It's like a corporate IT network with a perfect multi-million-dollar firewall being completely undone by a tired employee who just leaves a sticky note with a password attached to their monitor.
Yeah, that happens all the time.
Right, so isn't dropping a personal item exactly the kind of chaotic, unpredictable human error that dismantles perfect systems?
Realistically, absolutely. Human error is the downfall of almost every major criminal enterprise in history.
Right.
But in narrative fiction, realism doesn't always equal satisfaction. The error needs to feel earned, and it really needs to align with the specific environment the author has built.
So the sticky note doesn't work for you here.
Well, the sticky note analogy is actually perfect, but our protagonist isn't an absent-minded office worker. He is a hyper-vigilant strategist operating in a life-or-death scenario.
That's the bear.
When a thriller protagonist makes a mistake, readers want it to test their actual skill set. Dropping a monogrammed lighter is just a shortcut.
Okay, I can see what you're going for there. So let's see how we can strengthen this. If we strip the lighter out entirely, how do we keep the police on his trail without relying on a clumsy physical drop?
We need to shift the inciting flaw to a technical or systemic oversight, one that actually fits this process-driven criminal environment.
Make the mistake match the competence.
Exactly. If they're using high-level tech, let the tech be their downfall. We want to reward the reader's investment in the crew's technical prowess by making their mistake equally technical.
So,
what does that look like in practice for this specific scene at the laundromat?
Well, let's look at the tools they are already using. Jin uses a highly sophisticated digital bypass tool to tap into the junction box.
Right.
What if that specific tool, maybe because it's a black market piece of tech spliced together from different components, leaves a unique electronic signature on the security network?
Oh, like a fragmented line of code.
Exactly. And Detective Lin, who the text already establishes as a really sharp investigator, could recognize that specific malware signature from a previous, totally unrelated cybercrime file.
Wow, that completely changes the dynamic.
It really does.
It turns the mistake into a battle of intellects between the crew and Detective Lin rather than just a stroke of bad luck.
Right. It creates a cat-and-mouse game based on competence rather than just clumsiness.
That is fascinating. But what are the potential limitations to that idea? Because if it's a coding error, doesn't that shift the mechanical blame entirely onto Jin, the tech guy, rather than our protagonist?
It does shift the direct mechanical blame to Jin, yeah.
Which might take away from the leader's arc.
Well, the protagonist is the leader who approved the tech and the timeline, so he still bears the overarching responsibility, and that can actually create some great internal conflict for the crew.
True.
But if the author really wants to keep the failure tied directly to the protagonist's physical presence and utilize that wonderful rainy atmosphere, here's an alternative concrete example. We tie the forensic failure directly to the weather.
Okay, I like the sound of that. How so?
We already know the heavy Philadelphia rain foils their attempt to burn the getaway car.
Right.
What if that same relentless rain washes away the surface mud on the driver's side floorboards, revealing a highly specific trace material underneath?
Like something industrial.
Exactly. Something like uncertified structural steel dust.
Oh.
We know from the wider narrative that his brother worked at the Liberty Structural North site and that the corrupt CEO was importing uncertified steel to cut costs.
Right. Right.
So if our guy had been scoping out that specific construction site earlier in the day to build his heist plan, that unique, microscopic industrial dust could be deeply embedded in the treads of his boots.
I love that. That is so cohesive.
Right. The rain washes the generic mud away, the forensic techs process the car, they find the uncertified steel dust, and it points the detectives directly toward the Liberty Structural site.
It weaves the overarching corporate corruption theme right into the forensic catalyst of their capture.
Exactly. It makes everything feel connected.
So whether it's a digital breadcrumb left in a junction box or industrial steel dust on a floorboard, the police are now tracking them, which forces the crew's hand.
Yep, the timeline accelerates.
Right. Their careful getaway plan goes out the window, and they have to take the fight directly to the source. And that brings us to the mansion. But here's the issue we run into next. The protagonist's rapid descent into terrorizing an innocent child risks completely alienating the audience before his final redemption arc can truly resonate.
Yeah, this is the thematic climax of the material, and it is an incredibly delicate balancing act.
It's tense.
Very. Building directly on their escalating desperation, the crew is forced to completely abandon the shadows. They drive a heavy diesel truck straight into the pristine, insulated suburbs of Chestnut Hill to confront the CEO in his own multi-million-dollar mansion.
It is a massive, violent shift in the power dynamics. They are forcibly dragging the brutal, unforgiving rules of the underground vault right onto the manicured lawns of the elite.
It is a phenomenal concept. It really highlights the central tragic paradox of the narrative.
That he has to use the same tools of fear and coercion that the corrupt system used to destroy his family.
Exactly. However, the execution in the foyer of the mansion introduces a massive empathetic roadblock for the reader.
Let's break down exactly what happens in that foyer for a second.
Right. So the crew zip ties the CEO, his wife, and their 10-year-old son to these heavy dining room chairs.
Yeah.
And then the author allows the muscle Terrell to sadistically taunt the little boy. He literally taps a hunting knife against the child's cheek, while our protagonist just stands there and coldly watches, using the boy's sheer terror to force the CEO to sign a confession.
It's brutal, but let's look closely at the section discussing this breach, because the material makes a strong case for his ruthless mindset in this moment.
Okay, how so?
Well, the ticking clock of the police scanners is deafening here. They know the state police tactical units are literally minutes away.
Right, the walls are closing in.
Fast. So, is there a risk that showing mercy too early
might weaken the terrifying facade he absolutely needs to break the CEO before the cops breach the doors.
Look, that urgency is clearly laid out, and the ticking clock absolutely necessitates extreme pressure. I'm not denying that.
Right.
But we have to consider the cost to the reader's emotional investment. Readers will forgive an anti-hero for a lot of things.
Sure, we watch them steal, lie, kill, corrupt bad guys.
Exactly. But when he passively allows a child to be threatened with physical mutilation, he crosses a moral event horizon that is incredibly difficult to come back from.
He loses his sympathetic anchor.
Entirely. And the structural problem with losing that anchor is that it sabotages the climax of the scene.
Because of what happens with the SWAT team.
Right. Just a few pages later, when the SWAT team finally breaches the windows, he dives over a desk to shield that exact same boy with his own body.
Yeah, the whiplash there is intense.
Because he was so cold and complicit during the knife threat, that sudden shift to self-sacrifice feels completely disconnected. It feels unearned.
I see.
The weakness isn't that he gets ruthless. The weakness is that his descent into monstrosity happens way too abruptly, without any visible internal resistance.
Okay, so the goal isn't to remove the tension of the home invasion, but to carefully modulate his humanity within that extreme tension.
Exactly. We need to build visible internal friction between his absolute goal of securing the confession and his accomplice's escalating sadism.
The reader needs to see that he is in control of the violence, not consumed by it.
Yes.
So let's get into some concrete examples of how to rewrite this dynamic in the foyer. How does he maintain that control?
First, we can show him actively stepping between the muscle and the child.
Okay.
The moment Terrell pulls the knife and approaches the boy, our protagonist should immediately issue a harsh, undeniable command to back off.
Just shut it down entirely.
Right. He can explicitly state in front of the family that they are there to break the CEO, not the kids.
Establishing rules of engagement.
Precisely. It establishes a strict, rigid code of conduct, even in the absolute chaos of a home invasion.
That makes a lot of sense.
It signals to the reader that while he is executing a brutal crime, he still possesses a moral compass that separates him from a pure monster like Terrell. And honestly, it creates friction within the crew, which heightens the tension naturally.
But building on that point, if he actively stops Terrell from threatening the boy with a knife, how does he still apply enough pressure to force this incredibly stubborn CEO to sign a confession before the police arrive?
By shifting from physical violence to psychological leverage.
Oh.
Okay, this leads to our second concrete example. Instead of threatening the child's body, he should threaten the CEO's legacy.
The legacy.
Right. The CEO is a man who values his pristine corporate facade and his wealth above absolutely all else. He believes he is untouchable.
And our guy is holding the master ledger.
Exactly. He is holding the key to the kingdom. He can threaten to immediately upload high-resolution photos of the ledger's contents to the press, to federal investigators, and, most dangerously, to the cartel and union bosses that the CEO has been secretly skimming from.
So he hits him where it actually hurts.
Exactly. He can lean in and tell the CEO that if he doesn't sign the confession right now to clear his brother's name, the cartel will know exactly who stole their pension money by morning.
That is chilling.
It is. That kind of psychological terror, the complete guaranteed destruction of his empire, his reputation, and his future safety, is far more effective against a corporate narcissist than a knife.
It keeps the leverage intellectual.
Yes, it proves his strategic brilliance. And most importantly, it keeps his hands clean of child abuse, making his later physical sacrifice to protect the boy during the gunfire feel entirely earned and completely in character.
It makes perfect sense. Now, threatening the CEO's pristine corporate legacy naturally makes us look at how the author built that legacy on the backs of disposable workers. Which brings us to a major structural hiccup.
The names.
Right. Reusing identical character names for vastly different roles in this criminal ecosystem severely fractures narrative clarity and diminishes the thematic impact.
It really does. When we pull back and look at the foundational elements of the text, the literal names of the people populating this world, we hit a massive clarity issue that just interrupts the reading experience.
The material makes a really strong case for highlighting the vast disparity between these two worlds, the street level and the boardroom. But as I understand it from the notes, there is a glaring inconsistency.
Yeah, a big one.
In the opening chapter at the underground gambling room, the low-level, stocky security guard who tragically gets shot in the throat is named Marcus Collins.
Yes, he dies on page 12.
And then, roughly 2/3 of the way through the narrative, the protagonist traces the gold-embossed seal on the ledger back to the puppet master of the entire conspiracy.
Right.
And the billionaire CEO of Liberty Structural, sitting in his Chestnut Hill fortress, is also named Marcus Collins.
It's wild.
So a key theme running through this material seems to be the ultimate disposability of blue-collar workers compared to the insulated boardroom executives. Could the identical naming be a deliberate, ironic echo?
Like a thematic choice?
Yeah, is it a symbolic choice meant to link the bottom of the food chain to the top, showing that men with the exact same name are treated completely differently by the system?
Look, that is a brilliant thematic concept. That even if it is intended as a deliberate, ironic echo, the author has not provided the reader with the necessary signposts to understand that intention.
So it's just confusing.
Right now, it just causes massive cognitive dissonance.
Because the reader doesn't know if they missed something.
Exactly. When the protagonist dramatically reveals the CEO's name, the reader's immediate reaction isn't some profound realization of socioeconomic disparity.
They're just confused.
Their reaction is, wait, didn't they just shoot Marcus Collins in the throat in Chapter 1?
It pulls the reader completely out of the narrative dream.
Completely. They stop focusing on the high-stakes revelation, the tension evaporates, and they start flipping back through the pages to see if they misread something.
Right, or if the guard somehow survived a throat wound and got a massive corporate promotion.
Exactly. It breaks immersion entirely. When an author takes a big thematic swing like reusing a name, they have to manage the reader's cognitive load.
They have to hold their hand a bit.
Yeah, without explicit guidance, it causes entirely too much friction. So the suggestion here is to ensure distinct, socioeconomically reflective naming conventions, to reinforce the vast power gap, or to explicitly manage the irony within the text itself.
Let's give the listener some concrete examples of how to resolve this naming collision so the reader stays grounded.
Well, the most straightforward fix is to completely separate the identities. Interestingly, in one of the draft excerpts provided in the source material, the underground guard is actually referred to in one paragraph as Javier Jenkins.
Oh, so the author already had an alternative name.
Yes. The author should do a global search and replace to ensure the guard is consistently named Javier Jenkins throughout the entire manuscript.
Which firmly grounds him as a distinct street-level casualty of this corporate war.
Right. And that allows the author to reserve a patrician, authoritative name like Marcus Collins strictly for the CEO orchestrating the corruption from his mansion.
It clearly delineates the street from the boardroom without asking the reader to solve a puzzle.
Precisely.
But what if the author is absolutely married to the idea of both men having the exact same name for those thematic reasons? Like, if they want to keep that ironic echo, how do they do it without confusing the audience?
If they insist on keeping the names identical, then a character must explicitly call out the cruel irony in dialogue.
The author has to do the heavy lifting for the reader.
They have to.
How would that actually look in the scene, though?
It would happen during that climax in the foyer. When our protagonist confronts the CEO, he needs to physically connect the two deaths so the reader understands the parallel.
Okay.
He could slam the ledger on the mahogany desk and deliver a line like, "A man with your exact name, Marcus Collins, bled out on a counting table for your dirty money tonight while you were sleeping in silk."
Ah, put in the observation directly into the protagonist's mouth.
Exactly. By having him acknowledge the shared name, the author signals to the reader, yes, I know they have the same name. It is not an editorial oversight. It is a tragic, intentional reflection of the book's core themes.
That changes everything.
It really does. The reader can relax, stop flipping pages, and absorb the thematic weight. Without that explicit textual acknowledgement, it just reads as a frustrating continuity mistake.
That is such a great point. So, to bring this all together, if you want to keep your readers hooked, ensure every narrative choice serves your themes without breaking immersion.
Absolutely.
Align your crew's downfall with their technical skills or the environment, not a clumsy, cliched drop of a lighter. Keep your protagonist's morality complex, but rooted in psychological leverage and a strict code, rather than unchecked sadism against children.
Yeah, protect that sympathetic anchor.
Right? And finally, clean up those character names. Either separate them entirely, or explicitly call out the irony in the dialogue so your thematic echoes don't cause reader confusion.
Take these notes, revise your draft, and submit it back to us for further exploration. As you go back to the drafting board, think about that physical, leather-bound ledger at the heart of this story. Does your narrative balance the chaotic reality of human error with the cold precision of a perfect accounting system? Or is the ink getting a little too muddy to read?